Welcome to the Houdini HOULY Challenge Series. So, SideFX is holding a challenge where artists create a piece per day based on a daily topic every day for the month of July. I have decided to take on the challenge and also record and edit all of my work so that you get to see the process behind it. I'm doing this because I like a good challenge. So, let's get into it. So, today is day 21. It's actually day 21. Oh, whoops, sorry, draw. It's actually day 21 now. So, I've just gone on a recording marathon. I just went from muscle to peak to space to urban, and I'm probably going to go edit all of them and then start on sky. But yeah, urban, I love the end result of urban. Super happy with it. This is one where it was a lot of work, not complicated work, kind of menial labor. Like there were no technical challenges as such, just a lot. There was a lot to do. And so for this one, I had to make sure that I wasn't wasting time. I had to be very strategic about what I was spending my time on. So let me show you what I came up with. Alright, so here we are. You can see the million things that make up this render. This is mostly procedural. So super basic when it comes to the buildings. Oh, okay, let me see if I remember where everything is. Okay, let's begin with walls. So I have two sets of walls. Walls 1 is the one at the back. Walls is this one over here. So it's basically these boxes, and each box has basic things inside, right? It's just a window and a light. But not all of them have light. I'll place the lights afterwards. So you have all of these with these windows all procedurally generated. You have a street. Street also procedurally generated. It's made up of the center street, the sidewalk, and the skirting. And so that was a good start. Then all of these doors on the side, all procedural. That's these roller doors. You can see over here, just generate one and then copy to points. So it's made up of a bunch of these, and then each one fits over it, just like that. So you end up with a roller door. Merge that with the sides and the top, and you have yourself a roller door. Then there's also lots of these little metal pieces that make it up. That is metalwork, right? So just basic shapes, adding to the look of it. This, I needed more variation. So these three are only here, then these are repeated on. Then there's these two pillars that line up across. You can see them over there. That's just to add interest in the distance. Now this is where it starts to get time consuming. It's making all of these little elements. So I'll start with super basic stuff like crates. So crate over here. I start with a box, I blast off some edges, I poly bevel it, basically just using any technique that I could to make something that looks like a box. So I needed to spend like 15-20 minutes max. You can see over here, box, blast off some sides, poly divide, extrude these edges. You can get these edges off of the poly bevel and then extrude them out. You can see over here, poly bevel, edge fillet group, right? You can extrude them out. So that's pretty useful. I take the edges, polywire it so that I can have a sort of frame to it, just to add some visual interest, merge it with the base, remove these areas here because that's where your hands would go. So create over there. And then I wanted to reuse this as much as I could, so you can see that there's more duplicated over. Then I needed to create as many simple things as I could. So I also created some cones. I'm not going to go through them, but they're just tubes with a base. Created some boxes, so cardboard boxes, and then you throw those wherever you can. Like, it's about using quick and easy little pieces of geometry and putting them everywhere, right? Just filling the place up with them, but trying to not make it look too procedural, and also trying not to make it look like you're just reusing the same things. So I also have what you would call hero objects, things that draw your attention away from thinking that anything's procedural. So this plate over here on the ground, this was quite interesting. What I did was I got a texture from textures.com for a sewer cover. I created UVs on a grid. You can see over here, attribute from map. So that puts that onto it. You delete anything that doesn't have a color. Attribute blur to smooth it. And you're basically just extruding it, turning it into this, and then applying that UV in your materials. So you actually end up with a semi-decent sewer cover. There's more hero objects such as this bicycle tire on the right, over there, and also put pots in the window so that it has some depth to the image. There's pots in there, over here somewhere, yeah. So pots in a sink over there, and they just have a basic metallics material. That's another thing. It's important to try and reuse materials as much as possible. So I reuse that basic metal material in loads of places. I also had a basic black material, like a black plastic that I could just use everywhere, and that saved a lot of time. Pipes were super important and interesting, actually. Fortunately, the other day, for my astronaut, I did this exact setup, right? You connect 2 points and you have a drop in the middle. So that's all I did. I just turned it into a subnet, and what it does is you paint onto the walls. So you paint on, say, one side. I can show you the visualization for that. So you paint over there. What it'll do is it'll ray onto that side, shuffle the point positions around, and then connect them. So this isn't a perfect setup, because in a perfect setup, you would be able to just paint anywhere on the walls, and it would connect across with some randomization. However, because this one rays over and then switches point IDs around so that you end up with like crossing cables, what would happen is if you included, a patch over there, when the IDs get shuffled up, it would also connect that way, and that's not what you want. So I just duplicate that over. So you end up with some nice cables, and they have this color because of the visualizer, but they're actually just yellows, blacks, grays, and white, and some purple ones, right? So it's just some color variation on those. Over to the side here, I created pipes. This was something I was kind of proud of because it was a quick way to add a lot of detail. So blast everything that's not a wall. Attribute transfer a cost attribute from the doors because you don't want pipes running through the doors, like into doors. So you bring in the street, you attribute transfer over a cost value. And then I tried using the cost value, but I wasn't getting it working correctly. So I just deleted anything that has a cost value to it. So you remove any of those doors. Then you randomly group, so with a group expression set to random, you randomly group some points, you randomly group some endpoints, and then you go from start points to endpoints with find shortest path, generates this. Then random thickness for each primitive number. You also polyframe to find the tangential direction. That's something I spoke about in one of the other videos. What you can do is you can use that to add pipe ends, right? All of these little things, these little ends to the pipes, those are pretty cool to have. And so you just generate some pipes, and with the pipe ends, you end up with this, and then you merge it with the cables, you end up with this, and each thing has its own material. A cable material, a pipe material, and a metal pipe ends. Once again, using basic metallics. This one has its own, this one has its own. All right, that one was pretty cool. I was happy with that one. It added a lot of detail. Like that was bang for my buck. This was like a 30-minute setup or so, and I ended up with pipes and wires, so that was nice. Let me show you. Oh, so this over here, the sign, It says winner in Japanese. All I did was I went, oh, I hope it says winner. It would be pretty bad if it's something that's uncouth. If anyone speaks Japanese, I don't want to hear that this is like a curse word or something. But anyways, I think it says winner because I used Google Translate. And when is Google Translate ever wrong? So I used Google Translate, got that sign up there. I'll show you that. Cool little setup, super basic. So you have your font, right? You just copy paste, and then you use one of the font types that can handle non-English characters. I can't remember what defines that, but you can search which ones can use these sorts of characters. Then you convert this to a line. So you use a convert to NURBS, then convert line, fuse any points together, scatter some points onto it, extrude those back, or rather transform them back, add them together, add them to the main one, resample those, fuse them together so that they joined. Polywire. Polywire gives you some sharp edges, so you VDB from polygons. Still wouldn't come out right, so then you VDB smooth, that gives you that look of a neon sign. Convert VDB, make a bounding box, transform it back, so that's the back panel. Super simple, right? So you could put any word you want in here. So put my name, right? That'll just turn it into a sign. So nice little setup over there. I should have probably used it more, now that I'm thinking about it. If I can just change the font, I should have put more of these. Oh, I'm so silly. Oh, anyways, I also made these signs over here. They were, I think you can see me making these in Photoshop. So I'll show you the textures for them. Actually, before I show you that, I'll show you how it works, because this is an interesting thing. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, because I haven't actually done it before. I used to do it in Blender all the time when I used to do product renders. I used to make labels and things, and this was a technique I used to use in Blender. I don't know if I'm doing it right in Houdini though. So what you do is you do whatever you want on a geometry. So just making a basic geometry, and then you get your UVs. Right, so it has UVs on it. And then if you right click on the node that generates your UV, or any node that has the UVs, you can go down here to save, texture UV to image. We'll bring this up, and then you can put in, I'd recommend a resolution of like 2048 by 2048. You want it to be square, because the block that UVs are generated on are square. So 2048 by 2048 is good for anything that's medium resolution. Obviously, anything that's close up, you want to go higher. Anything that's further away, you want to go lower. So that saves a UV. What you can do with that is you can actually open it. So I'll show you this. This sign has this UV pattern. So this sign has this UV. This is the image that you get out. It's 2048 by 2048. Then you take this into Photoshop and you paint whatever you want onto here. And then you can use it in Houdini, right? So you can use it in your textures. So let me actually minimize this and then show you the other thing. Right, so as you can see, this I just fitted onto here, and then I can use this for a sign. This just says karaoke night, and it's a little picture of a little dude having a good time. You know, he's busy singing, and it says 1,000 yen, and then 9 between because I gotta represent. And yeah, so as long as these line up, then when you bring that in as a texture, it will fit perfectly. So that's a good way to texture if you don't want to use something like Substance or anything like that. That's a good way to do it. You can just export the UV, match up an image over the UV, and it goes. So then the biggest setup in here is actually the lanterns. Let me show you the lanterns. They're over here. So lanterns. I use the same setup for lanterns and cables. How it works is firstly generate a really long line, right? A line that just runs straight down the middle, of my buildings. And so then I give it some noise. So then I say at all the low points, put some lanterns for me. And so I have these copy to points for visualization. I copy some lanterns to the low points, right? And I use a fuse node to make sure that none of them are too close together. So you end up with some lanterns just like that. There's some randomization to their rotations and all of that, but nothing too fancy. Then on the other side, I take all of those lamp points, right? So all of these points here are where the lamps would be. And then I say add normals to these so that they sort of shoot up that way. Then ray in the direction of the normals towards the buildings. So if it hits a building, it rays onto the building. Then I merge them together and connect them. And then I do the same for the other side. So now all of the lamps are connected to these wires. Resample and do that drop thing that I usually do. So once again, I'm not even going to call it the astronaut thing because it's just something that I've done often. I reuse this sort of thing often with the curve U and drop. It's a very useful technique. So yeah, polywire that, and then that gets merged in with a bunch of other cables. So I just convert that to a cable, I do the same thing over here for these that are sticking off the wall. Yeah, so you end up with those lamps and those lamps. And if you had to merge them together, you end up with that. So as you can see, what I'm actually outputting over here are just points. And that's because I'm using instance. So you can see here, s at instance equals obj lantern rounded. So what that'll do for me is fetch the rounded lantern geometry that I have. So you can see over here, I have the rounded one and I have the squared one. That will just copy them to all those points. And then the rain thing is like a 2-second setup. Literally just some points scattered into a big box. Right, so you ISO offset, you scatter, and then you jitter. And you give it a velocity of minus 9.8 on the y-axis, that's the same as gravity. S at instance, so once again you're instancing, and I'm just instancing some simple rain geometry. It's this over here. And then you add motion blur, so that it looks like streaks of rain. Right, so once you have those million things in place, the final render will look like this. And I just want to show you two things before I head on out. Firstly, materials, right? It looks like a lot, but most of them are super basic. Only some of them have like actual textures to them. A lot of it's procedural, the most complicated one being the street. So I'll show you street quickly. Where are you? Street. So this is actually the most complicated one, and it's not complicated. It's a texture. So I have a close-up asphalt texture. I color correct it, so I have a dark version and a light version, and I mix it based on noises, so it's kind of blotchy. I then use a damaged asphalt as a bump map. And then over here, I have a displacement based on some cracks in the ground, and I multiply those cracks by a max on noise, so that only in some areas do the cracks show up, right? So there's a noise that controls where the cracks are showing up. And yeah, that's the most complicated. That's as complicated as it gets, right? Materials were basic, they were just everywhere. There were a lot of them. And the other thing was that compositing was quite important here. I'll show you. So to start with, you have this, right? It looks very flat, nothing really pops, it's low contrast. You can see the end where it doesn't look very good, all of that. All of these things really take away from the image that it could be. Yeah, that actually ended up pretty cool. I actually like this a lot. So obviously not a great image right now. So what I do is as an AOV, I had the Z depth. So Z depth is useful for determining how far away something is, but you always have to remap your Z depth because it doesn't know what range you want, right? So it just displays it as black and white, and you might see this and you're like, oh, this is a useless image, right? There's nothing I can do with this. You have to remap it. So you take it into a VOP cop filter and you fit it between a new range. So you can get something like this, right? Now you can see I'm getting distance. And then I blur it and use that to sort of soften that area in the distance. You can see it goes from this to this. So you can add some of that fog in the distance, and that really helps sell it a lot more. But the main thing actually comes from the Redshift post effects. So you can see how much that pops, right? It goes from bland to crazy good looking. What I'm doing here is just a photographic exposure where I'm increasing the film ISO. If you're not familiar with photography, increasing ISO allows you to take photos in lower light. So it's basically increasing the exposure. So increase the exposure slightly, do a crush on black. So all of the areas that are underexposed get crushed. They basically get darker. You add a vignette. And so you have this darkening towards the edges. Also post effects, bloom, and some lens flare, right? You can get away with it on an image like this. I went for these colors because I wanted redemption after the speed entry, because I really like this sort of vaporwave cyberpunk aesthetic. So used it over here. My favorite part is actually this sign. I really like the way the sign glows. This one says random words. It says random words. This one's karaoke night. This one says like new light or something. I can't remember what nonsense I was coming up with at like 2 a.m. And then that one says 9 between, represent, and this one just says winner. If I don't win, that's gonna be ironic. But I hope I make top 3 with this one. I like the way this one turned out. I'm not in it to win. I hope you like this one. I really liked the way that this one came out. Once again, I'll attach the file for you. I know I haven't been attaching the files recently, but I also haven't been even making videos recently, so double apology on that. I will put these up, you can go through them, have fun with them, check them out. All of it should work except the materials, so you can add your own materials to this and like do your own thing. Anyways, thank you for watching. Once again, I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sky. I'm interested to see what I can do with Sky. I'm thinking very fantasy, something very light, something impressive, you know, something where you're like, wow, that's cool. I suppose I should always be trying something like that. But anyways, thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.